Hi, this is Teri from Stamping Magic. Welcome back to my channel. I have another Create Your Own video to share with you today, and this time I'm showing you how I created my wreath building templates. I'm going to show you how to create these two very basic wreaths later on in the video, but I just wanted to mention that these templates enable you to create multiple sizes and different types of wreaths very quickly and very easily. This is what the templates look like. So I have a separate template for each size of wreath I want to create, but it's possible to create multiple sizes with each one of these. Now I have my 5-inch template, my 4-inch one, which I'm going to show you how I created later, and I'm also going to show you a different method of creating these. This one used the layering square framelit dies. So let's get started. I'm starting with a piece of window sheet, which is acetate, that measures 7.5 inches square. Now I've chose this size because this is the size of my Stamparatus platform, so it will sit nicely in there. I've added a little repositionable glue right in the centre of the window sheet just to stop it moving about. And then I'm centering it on my grid paper. My grid paper has cross lines running through the middle horizontally and vertically, so I'm making sure that they run through the centre of my window sheet. To create these templates, basically you need to cut out 2 squares. Now I'm going to mark the corners of the squares using a Sharpie marker, and I'm going to use the rulers on the top and the right hand side of my grid sheet to help me do this. These run from 0 on the centre lines out to the corners, counting up in inches. I'm going to be creating a 4-inch template, so I want to mark my corners 2 inches either side of the horizontal and vertical centre lines. So I'm marking my top right first of all, and then I can bring that across to the top left and make my mark, and then I can carry that down to the bottom left and then across to the bottom right. Each time just double checking that I'm at the 2-inch lines. Now I've got my 4 corners marked. I'm now going to take a metal ruler and a craft knife, and I'm going to cut between those points. Now if you wanted to, before doing your cut lines, you could draw them in using your Sharpie marker, but it's really not necessary as long as you can see the 2 corner dots. Now I'm placing my blade, and then I'm ensuring that the ruler is right up against that blade. You want to be as accurate as possible when cutting these out. So I'll now go ahead and cut the other sides. If you didn't want to use a craft knife to cut out this square, you could actually cut it with your trimmer. Just be careful you get the outside margin spot on. I now need to reposition the acetate to cut my second square. I'm going to leave the centre square still in position. This will keep the template stable while I make the second lot of cuts. Now all you do for the second one is align each corner on those centre lines on the grid. And I'm going to mark the corner points of the square exactly as I did before. So I'm looking at my top and right hand rulers, and I'm marking the corners at 2 inches. And then I can go ahead and make the cuts for each side. Once all the cuts have been made, you can remove all the centre bits of acetate. Any big bits I'll keep to use on future projects for shaker cards and things. Now, just to mention, under my grid paper I do have a self-healing cutting mat, so be careful what you're cutting on. I've cut out a 4-inch piece of Whisper White cardstock, and for this first use of the template you want to make sure your square is cut out as precisely as possible. Try it both ways in the template and make sure that it sits in there nicely. If it doesn't, you may have to cut just a tiny slither off of one side on each of the squares. So check it and trim if necessary. This time mine was fine, it fit in there nicely, so I can position my first stamp, and this is from the Painted Poppy stamp set. And you can position your stamp anywhere on your square of card. If it's more towards the outside edge, you'll get a larger size wreath. If it's more towards the centre, you'll get a smaller size wreath. And this is what I meant when I said you can create multiple sizes with one template. So now I can ink up my stamp, and I'm using Daffodil Delight ink here, and stamp it down. And then you want to move your cardstock clockwise or anti-clockwise, it doesn't matter as long as you use the same direction all the time, one step. So you can see I'm doing that here. Then I can ink up my stamp again and stamp it down. So you just continue in this way until you've gone round all the steps. Now that I've finished my first layer, I can position my second stamp. Now I'm positioning it at the top again, but you don't have to. You can start at any point on that cardstock. Using Memento Tuxedo black ink this time, and I'm just inking up my stamp, stamping it down, rotating my cardstock, inking my stamp up, stamping it, and I'm just repeating that again until I've been through all 8 points. And if you want to, you don't have to go through all 8 points. You might want to skip every other one, so you just do 4 stampings. You may want to add an additional stamp in the gaps in between, so you know that's another option. The options really are pretty endless. So you've now seen one way of creating these templates. I'm now going to show you a different way. For this second method, I'm starting with a 6-inch piece of window sheet or acetate and a 6-inch piece of grid paper, and I've just highlighted the centre lines on the grid paper. I've just cut this out of an old scrap piece. I'm going to secure these two together just using some small pieces of washi tape. To cut my squares this time, I'm using the largest die from the Layering Squares framelit set. Now this die is a really awkward size. It's 7.2 centimetres, which is just less than 2 15/16 of an inch. So it's not easy to centre this across that grid paper, but you need to be as precise as you can with it. You want that centre point on the grid to be the centre point on the square, and then just fix it in place with some more washi tape. Then you can run it through your die cutting machine. And this time I'll remove that centre square. Now the reason I'm using 6-inch size for my grid and acetate this time is because that's the maximum size I can get through my Big Shot. If you've got a bigger machine that takes 8.5 by 11 or A4 size, you could keep this at 7.5 inches. Now for my second cut, it's a bit easier this time because all you need to do is align those corner points with the centre lines on your grid. Again, be as precise as you possibly can, and once you're happy, add some more washi to keep it in place and run it through your die cutting machine. Then you can remove all the loose pieces, separate your grid from your acetate and your template is ready to use. I've used the same die to cut out some Whisper White cardstock, and I'm just going to check my template exactly as I did before. It should be fine because you've used a die to cut it. And then you can test your template out. So I'm adding my cardstock into the template, and this time I'm using a stamp from the Rooted in Nature stamp set. So I'm positioning that, picking it up with my plate, and then stamping it down. Then I'm going to rotate my card and repeat the process until I've done this on all 8 points. The die I used to cut the squares was actually the largest square die that I own. If you have even larger dies, you can use those to create templates, which are, the larger the template, the more versatile it is in some ways. Although if you've only got a 6-inch die cutting machine, you're going to be limited to the size of template you can create anyway. But just experiment with what you've got and see what you can create. I wanted to give you a little additional information on these templates. Now I've cut out the squares on mine, but you don't have to if you don't want to. You can just draw them in on your acetate and you can use them in exactly the same way. You'd start by positioning your cardstock over one of the squares, then you'd position your stamp, pick it up, ink it up, stamp it, and then you'd rotate your card to the next point, just positioning it over the drawn squares. And then you'd continue in this way until you'd gone through all the points that you want to. Now this is fine for a general wreath because they don't actually need that much precision. But on this example I'm showing you here, I have overstamped the pink flowers with a centre mini flower in red, and that needs to be quite precise. The trouble with having a drawn template is that you cannot position that square of cardstock in exactly the same place each time. So you'd have to check the position before you stamp it each time. But otherwise the templates work really well. You will never get exact precision with the cut templates either, because obviously they're hand cut and not laser cut. As I said before, you can get lots of different looks using these templates. Now this one was created using the Thoughtful Blooms stamp set, and this one with the Make a Splash stamp set. This next one was again using painted poppies, just the little leaf flourish, and then this one you saw me create, and I also created another one. This was in Mango Melody, and the poppies have been stamped in VersaFine and clear embossed. This one, which I think is absolutely beautiful, was created using the Good Morning Magnolia stamp set. This one is a 5-inch one, and I used Thoughtful Blooms again. This one, Daisy Lane. Another one using the painted poppies, and my final one uses Make a Splash again. So I hope this gives you some idea of the different looks that you can get using these templates. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this project. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notifications bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. Bye for now.